Hello, fellow photographers.
In the coming September 27, 28, 2015, there is a total eclipse along with the supermoon. So it's a great photography opportunity. In this video, I will show you how to use a PlanIt to plan this shot. So first, let's use the timeanddate.com to figure out the exact time for this eclipse. So if you go to timeanddate.com and you select the sun, the moon, and eclipse, the first one will be the upcoming one. You can just click on that. It will see a page with all kind of information available for this photo shooting event. So this one actually very nice. It shows you what do you mean by different kind of eclipse. There is a just Earth's shadow that cover the moon. That's called a penumbra. So this is just cover shadow. Well, for the photographer purpose, it's not a good one because you just have some shadow on the moon. It's not very obvious. What we're interested in is when the Earth covered the moon. So that's when the starting of the, if you, for example, if you want to shoot time lapse or you want to composite of all the moon's on foreground, this is a good time to get started. So then the Earth continue moves, and now it cover everything. That's when the blood moon gonna happen. So the moon will be in red color. This is the maximum, and this is when the eclipse ends. This is when the eclipse ends right here. So what we're interested in is starting from here and shooting all the way until this moment. Okay, so this is a very nice map where it shows where you can see the full eclipse event. So for example, everything in this red color here, you can see the whole process from starting to end. South America, West Africa, West Europe, and East North America. And I'm in San Diego right now, so I cannot see the whole process. But there's both pros and cons of either case. So if you're over in this area, you can see the whole process. But at the same time, the moon is relatively high in the sky when that happens. So it's not hard, it's very hard to find a composition that along with the foreground. But if you're shooting somewhere near here, you can't see the whole process. But the moon when the eclipse happened, the moon is very low on the horizon, so you can find a nice foreground to go with it. And here's the extra time it happens. So the UTC time is September 28, but in San Diego is September 27. And this is the one we're still interested in. That's the beginning, and that's the end. So we're gonna try to shoot from 6:07 p.m. all the way to 9:27 p.m. Let's now take a look how to use the app to plan this event. So first of all, let's set the time to September 27. And the time to 6:07. So this is where the moon is at the time. So looks like the moon was still below the horizon, because if you look at the moonrise time, is actually 6:36 that day. The moon is still below horizon, but it's okay because when the moon rises up, it's already partially eclipsed. And for this one, we're gonna use the time-lapse feature. So let's switch to time-lapse. I'm gonna set the starting time to 6:07. To do that, you don't have to input manually here. You just tap here and then use current time as starting time. So now this two was synced. So this is a time-lapse page. The reason I use time-lapse because I plan to take a time-lapse of the whole process. And time-lapse, there is several values you didn't know for time. The first one, this is the duration. So that's how long you're gonna stay there to take a picture. And this one is the interval between the shot. So for example, you take one shot, then wait for 30 seconds, take another shot. That's what this 30 second means. And this one is the clip length, and this one is a frame per second. So that's the result. So that's why there's an arrow pointing that. So this is a picture, and this is a video. So for the video at 30 frames per second, you're gonna a 10-second video. So that's what this means. because I know the exactly starting and ending time. So I would rather make the clip length to be a variable. So I make this one, click, just non-press on that, it become auto. It means these three values together will calculate this value. So for the ending time, I will set it to 9:27. It tells me the total duration will be 3 hours 20 minutes. Probably in this case, I will not should say today. Maybe I'm gonna use 10 seconds or even 5 seconds, depends what I'm gonna do. So let's say if I use 5 seconds, that's very fast, and I'll end up with 2,400 shot. So if I have a 50 megabytes per shot, I will need 120 gigabytes. So that's a lot of memory card I need to use. So I have to think about it. Should I do that or should I should next shot? So for example, maybe you use 10. That'll be 1,200 shot. So total memory will be 16 gigabytes. So maybe 64 gigabytes should be good enough. So this give you some, you know how much memory you're gonna need. And in this case, you prepare for that. Otherwise, you're gonna run out of memory, or you didn't even notice that, then you'll miss some important shot. So keep in mind, use this feature to figure those out. Now, the next thing I'm gonna do is I want to see what moon composition will be look like in this case. Let's take a look at the viewfinder mode. So where is the moon right now? Okay, just non-press. Okay, so there is a moon. Let me go back to time lapse. So that's what moon is. It's very dim right now. You can't even see it. Because it's below horizon, and we use a little transparent color to paint the moon. So that it doesn't look like very obvious. And just to make it go faster, okay? So I'll use a different color, a different time-lapse interval. So this way it'll go fast. You can play it. So you can see the moon moves up. And I'm gonna stop somewhere. I don't know where we're gonna stop. Okay, here. So in other words, the moon, this is the track the moon gonna move. So you have to think about what's good composition to go with it. Because if you on East Coast, the moon will be slightly more horizontal. In other words, the horizontally it moves more. But in San Diego, it will move a lot vertically, but not much horizontally. So in other words, in San Diego, maybe you need to use a portrait orientation to do the shot. So you can even see what focal length to use. If you use 35, non-press on the time, it will set the starting time here. The moon is somewhere around here. And the ending time will be over here. So if you do a plan, you will see how the moon moves. That'll give you an idea this location is. Well, wait a minute. That's not the app can do. So the app really can help you to plan the shot and knowing where exactly the moon is and where the foreground is. So let's go back and press these two locations because that's just random location placed on the map. So I will know the marker. This is San Diego high buildings. So you can see all the markers here. Each one is have a height and weight associated with it, width associated with it. And I'm gonna pin the camera scene icon somewhere on the skyline. Doesn't really matter where it is. But for the camera location, it's very important because I need to place the where I can use the foreground, the skyline as foreground. Because I know where the moon is, where the moon will be moved from here to here. So in other words, I need to find a location that I can see the skyline facing east. The best location in San Diego will be somewhere around in this area. And the Shutter Island certainly is a good choice. So just non-press, we pin the camera icon. Now if you switch to the viewfinder, you can see the skyline is right here. This is the skyline. Each rectangle is actually corresponding to a building. So now we can play it again. So the moon actually rises just above the skyline, which is nice, something I would really like to have. And it stops over here. So that's the time-lapse plan. So we can save it, save the plan, Let's call it Eclipse 927. That's the first shot, the time lapse at 35 millimeter. So you can give whatever name you want, something makes sense to you. Okay, that's a first plan. For the second plan, I would like to shoot something zooming the version of the skyline and the moon. So maybe somewhere around here. So time is 6:46, where the moon just rises above the skyline. And in that case, of course, I will not use this kind of composition because I'm gonna further zoom in maybe to 300 millimeter lens. I'm gonna use a landscape orientation, maybe kind of something like this. The moon maybe at 1/3 in the skyline. Well, of course, I will adjust what the composition is, but it tells me 300 probably a good one to shoot this one. I might zoom out a little bit more so I had more sky and more water because this is in the waterfront. So somewhere like this. It totally depends on what you feel at that moment, you know. That's how you're gonna shoot it. So if 300, maybe I'm gonna compose it this way. Okay, for this one, I'll save it. This is the moonrise at 300 millimeter. So this is the second shot I want to take. The next one will be the moon has the full eclipse happens. So that's at the 7:11. So I zoom out a little bit more on the 7:11. Okay, around here. For this one, maybe 100 millimeters will work. I will make the horizon to be right in the center. I will have some reflection of the moon on the ocean. And this is full eclipse. So this is the third one I want to take. Total eclipse at 100 millimeter. And finally, the moon at maximum eclipse, which at 7:47. Well, the moon is out of picture. Let's zoom out a little bit more, maybe to 55 millimeter lens. So now we see the moon. Okay, 7:47. Again, I probably use this composition. Then save it. Maximum eclipse at 55 millimeter lens. Okay, so see, I have all the plan down here. I know exactly what focal length to use, what to expect, and when that's gonna happen. So all the plans saved so far, I can know them back when I was there at that time, and I can check, verify if that's the one I want. After you plan more, you have more feeling of what composition to use, what focal length is the best in this case. You know, it just give you a more like a confidence instead of just have to think everything when you add the scene. So now you basically move some of the thinking right now instead of when you actually shooting the moon. The moon goes very fast. If you miss it, you might miss some shot if you didn't think it beforehand. Okay, so that's a part for the planning. In the second part of the video, I will talk about exposure. The exposure in this case is quite complicated because the moon color and brightness are constantly changing, so make the exposure very challenging. Let's take a look at each case and see what exposure we should use. So for the first one, let's note back the plan for the moon rise and 300 millimeter. So here's the plan. So first thing you need to keep in mind is take a look at where the sun is at this moment. So the quick way, just click on the sun and the moon position page. It will tell you the sun is at -2.4. This is actually still within the civil twilight. So what civil twilight means is the sun just set, and there is still some color left by the sun. So everything is still clear enough. If you switch to the exposure page and you change to the scene mode, the scene mode will based on the current time and figure out what exposure value you should use. And you need to choose what subject. And in this case, I will choose skyline. And the skyline, right now the EV is suggested is 3.3. So this EV actually changes. If you change the time, you see the EV changes. But at this time, the EV is at 3.4. So it tells you if I want to use ISO 100 and use f8, you need a 6-second exposure. But in this case, it's not gonna work because we are shooting a moon here. And at 300 millimeters, the moon moves very fast across the viewfinder. So in order to get a properly exposed, not blurry moon and still exposed correctly, the best way you can do it, you need to reduce this one. So you probably need to reduce one to, let's say, to ISO 1600, and it tells you need a 0.4 second exposure, which should work in this case. But it is more complicated. Let's say the moon right now, keep in mind, is partially eclipsed in San Diego when the moon just rise. So the top portion was covered by the shadow, so it's very dark, and the bottom still bright. So which means in order to keep the brightest part not overexposed, you need to expose according to the moon brightening, not the skyline. Which means we have to change the scene because this right now the subject of the scene is skyline, and we have changed to moon. And in this case, we're using full moon as an example because right now it's full moon, and this app doesn't know anything about eclipse. Maybe there's something we'll add in the future. But right now, this exposure value, EV12, is the moon brightness, and it's the brightest part. And for this one, I can go back to 100. And I use ISO 100, f8, 16th of a second. So that's the exposure you should use in order to make sure the moon was not overexposed.
So what will be the skyline look like? It will be very dark, but it's okay. The skyline EV 3.4 and the moon EV is 12. So there's only 8.6 gap between the two subjects. And most of the new cameras nowadays can capture a dynamic range of 12 or more, or even 14. So which means you could get both exposed properly. I mean, maybe not the best, but get both covered, use the same picture. But there is a way to make it even better. Because the moon gonna rise up, when the moon is overlapping with the building, you better expose according to the moon. But when moon moves up a little bit, when it's detached from the building, you can take another exposure for the skyline. So for example, right now, if you look at skyline, it will be, we can change the subject to skyline. It tells you need a 12-second exposure at f8 and ISO 100. So take another shot, then you can combine two shots in the post-processing. You basically move the moon back to the previous location with overlapping. But the skyline will use the one that from 12-second exposure. So that's how this shot is gonna work.
Once you have this set, you can save it again because it doesn't really matter. You can just save it again. Now you have a exposure, all the value here. You can just look up what you at that time and take a look, decide and set the camera according to those values. Okay, so that's the first shot. So for the second shot, let's open that should be the total eclipse. For the total eclipse, let's take a look at it's at -7.6. It's a blue hour. So you actually get a nice blue color as a background right now. But if you look at the exposure again, switch back to the scene mode and look at skyline. The skyline is right now, its EV value is 1. And this is exposure you should use to get that shot. And how about the lunar eclipse? Because right now the full eclipse begins. So here it actually have to suggest you what lunar eclipse should be. If you switch to the menu. So this is a lunar eclipse. So the EV is 2, which is very nice. As you can see, the skyline is at 1 and the lunar eclipse at 2, which means you can get both in one shot without any post-processing. And at the same time, you can get a nice background. So only thing you need to care about is the shutter speed. You make sure that the moon doesn't move too fast. So the 1/4 of a second, it should be good enough. If you think you want to keep to 1 second, you can try to reduce this one, maybe to say 400 millimeter. Yeah, maybe to ISO 400 and use 1 second. Or you can use 800, then you can increase the aperture a little bit more so that you get more depth field. So all these are the settings that you can consider. 1 second, f5.6, ISO 800. You can get a one shot of both moon and skyline properly exposed, and the moon doesn't get blurry. It's only because it's only 1 second. Okay, so that's for the second shot. Relatively easy one, no processing. And how about the third one, which is the maximum eclipse and 55 milliseconds. And for this one, we can take a look. Again, let's see what the skyline is. Well, skyline is still at 1, which means that's okay. So I will use the same setting to 800. Then then aperture to 5.6. Then this one, maybe 2 settings is okay because now I'm using 55 millimeter lens. So the wider the lens, the longer you can expose the moon. That's just how it works. And if you think you want rather make it even better, even shorter, so maybe you can do 16 seconds, then have 1 swing exposure. So that's for this shot. Again, a very easy one. For the time lapse. Let's open the plan, the time-lapse one, 35 millimeter lens. So this one is more complicated because the sun was still up on the sky at 6:07. So if you look at this, the sun-moon position, the sun was at 5.8 degree. So that's just the beginning of the sunset. And at the end, it will be completely dark. The sun was at negative 35 degree. So there's a challenge that we have to consider the whole scenario from bright all the way to the complete dark. And what we're gonna do. So the only way the camera can adjust automatically, the exposure automatically, is to use the automatic auto exposure, and let the camera detect what the aperture, ISO, or the shutter speed they should use. But we need to give some guidance, otherwise it'll be not gonna work. So, for example, let's switch to the scene mode, and we use the skyline as a subject, and switch back to the beginning 6:07, and come back. At that time, the skyline EV was 11.5, and this is the setting I should use. The time passed by, you see the shutter speed getting longer and longer. Now it's 0.4 seconds. Now it's 2.5 seconds. And you see the moon where the moon is. The moon is right here. So just before the moon coming out, it's already 3.2 seconds. So because there's no moon at this moment, we can take a long exposure. That's just fine because the moon is not there. And once the moon is out, we have to make sure we don't take a long exposure because then the moon will get blurry. So in other words, before the moon comes out, we're gonna shoot the sunset at ISO 100, aperture at f8, and let the camera decide what shutter speed to use. So when the moon, just before the moon came out, we're gonna quickly change to another priority. In this case, we need to make sure the time will be at 2 seconds because that's the longest exposure we would like to do. But before do that, let's set this back to auto but just push whatever exposure composition back to the ISO. So this is the setting we're gonna quickly change to from the aperture priority to shutter speed priority. And instead of using aperture as a composition, we use ISO, make it ISO auto. You can set that in the camera as well. So after that, the moon gonna come out, and you can see the ISO will change. We'll keep the same shutter speed at 2, keep the same aperture at f8, the shutter speed is gonna change. And then right this point will be ISO 1600 and all the way to the end. So now the whole process, we're gonna have a consistently exposed skyline. The moon will not be blurry, but moon will be overexposed in some cases because the moon was partially bright, and some part was bright, some part was covered by Earth. So that there's no way we can make the moon not overexposed. But that's fine because the time lapse, the whole process will be make sure the skyline and the transition between the color, the brightness, everything is smooth. So the skyline is the one we want to keep it smooth. I just realized one thing. So if you want to shoot time lapse because it's a video, you don't really use this portrait orientation. So we need to switch to landscape orientation. But at 9:27, the moon will be out of the viewfinder. So we need to maybe switch to 24mm lens, and now it will be slide down a little bit because we have to cut the ratio. Instead of 4:3, it will be 16:9. So we have to cut the top portion a little bit out. So that's a composition we want to use for the time lapse. And then 607 is over here, and 927 is over there. So 24mm lens, the one to use. Let's save that. And 24mm lens. Okay. So that's for the planning for San Diego. If you want to show other place, I can give you a quick one to show you how to find the best location. So let's go to San Francisco, okay? And in San Francisco, one of the good locations to shoot is from the Golden Gate Bridge. But we have to look at this carefully. Let's switch to the distance tool and change the time to 6:07. So this is the Golden Gate Bridge, and this is where the skyline is. Skyline is somewhere around here. Well, I already add a marker for the bridge as well, so that I can see it. But right now, I just gave you an idea what should you do. So in this case, you could shoot from the top over here because the moon was there. Then you have to rise it up, and eventually the moon will be over here. So you can see part of the skyline, part of the bridge, which is okay. Another way is shoot from this lighthouse over here. That also give you good angle to cover everything. But other area will not work because if you want to shoot sky over here, I mean there is another one here. You can also shoot the Golden Gate Bridge, but the angle is totally wrong. So this location won't work for this particular event. So that's for the Golden Gate Bridge area. So how about Yosemite? Okay, this is Yosemite. Let's take a look. And 6:07, the moon is over here. And where's the glacier point? Let's find out where the glacier point is. Let's pin my camera over there, glacier point. So what happened in this case, the moon will appear on the right of the half dome, and it'll move all the way to the over here. So it might work, but it really depends on what you think here. Because for me, well, let me take a look and what it look next in real. And switch to the viewfinder mode. Okay, this is a half dome. We can take a look. So this is what the time-lapse is gonna look like. The half dome will be way to the left. For me, it's not the best location, but it's kind of works, you know. The ideal location for this one is actually if you shoot from maybe the Yosemite Point. Let's take a look. What it look like from Yosemite Point. Yeah, here we go. See, this is a much better location if you want to shoot the whole thing. Take a look. So this is the moon sunset time. The half dome will be glowing red, and then the moon gonna rise up all the way to here. that won't be a perfect shot if you can make up to the Yosemite point. But you probably need a camping over there because that's it's pretty long hike up there. So you better prepare for the camping. Okay, that's for the Yosemite National Park. So this just to give you some ideas when you scout for locations, and you can use this app to plan exactly what the composition tree is and what exposure, what focal length, everything you need to know before that event. So finally, I hope you enjoy this video. I know it's a little bit too much information here, but still hope you enjoy it and you can learn something from it. And finally, I want you to get some nice shot from this lunar eclipse event. And happy shooting.